Lightning struck, and the server room lights went out the very second he zipped up his fly. That's not a metaphor. Actual lights, actual server room, and an actual bolt of lightning. Ethan Miller, newly minted executive, had dragged me in here an hour ago under the guise of auditing digital asset security. What he conveniently left out was that he already knew what I'd find missing, or rather, what I wouldn't be able to find. Every folder I'd worked on for the last 6 months was empty. Every script I'd written, every design I'd refined, every system automation marked with my employee ID, gone. Ethan Miller, in his smug Patagonia vest and startup smirk, leaned against a server rack like he was posing for a LinkedIn banner ad. Weird, he drawled. Must be a sync error. But a sync error doesn't erase metadata. It doesn't replace my version with his, timestamped 2:43 a.m. on a Sunday when the office was closed and his badge was conveniently deactivated for maintenance. I checked, but I said nothing. Just stared at him, watching the corners of his mouth twitch like he was holding back laughter, like this was a test to see how much I'd bend before I broke. He should have known. I don't break. I rebuild from the ashes. So, what now? I asked, keeping my voice glacial. He tilted his head, feigning concern. Well, see, if you can't provide the originals, I'm afraid the lawyers will have to attribute ownership to the last saved versions, which are all under my name. That's when it hit me. That click in my head, that bone-deep chill that says they planned this. What he didn't know, and wouldn't for a long time, was that the version control system we used had loopholes. Loopholes I'd identified 2 years ago after my old boss tried to pull something similar. I didn't say a word. I just started running hourly backups to a remote server, encrypted in a pay-as-you-go cloud vault under a pseudonym tied to a shell corporation in Delaware. I even incorporated it using the gas station Wi-Fi. Let me be clear, I architected the very systems they were now pretending to own. I bled for those builds, once sobbed alone in a stairwell at 3 a.m. when I couldn't get a migration to pass QA. I gave them solutions that saved $1.3 million in customer churn, and Ethan Miller got a standing ovation from the board because of my work. But this wasn't about recognition anymore. It was about erasing me from the narrative. He didn't just want the promotion. He wanted me expunged from company history, wiped clean like chalk dust. As I was leaving the server room, he called after me, "Don't take it personally." I stopped. "No," I replied, not turning around. "I'm taking it strategically." He laughed like I'd made a joke. But that's the thing about people like Ethan Miller. They never see when the joke's on them. The day after the server room incident, HR sent out an updated org chart. My name was gone from the infrastructure systems leadership list. In its place was Ethan Miller, Acting Director of Digital Architecture. Acting Director, how cute. That title didn't even exist until he carved it out of my job and nailed a new sign over the corpse. The cherry on top was a calendar invite to a joint Q3 achievements and upcoming projects briefing, with Ethan Miller listed as the primary presenter. I didn't decline the invite. I didn't storm into anyone's office. I just showed up and brought popcorn, metaphorically speaking. He walked in 10 minutes late, looking important, pulled up the presentation I'd designed, down to the animations, and started droning on about revolutionary pipeline stability improvements. The same talking points I'd presented back in April, only now they were cloaked in his buzzwords and sprinkled with AI nonsense. He even mispronounced Kubernetes. People nodded along like he was Moses parting the DevOps sea. That's when the tension in my stomach shifted to something cleaner, colder. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was observing, documenting. Because 2 nights earlier, sitting on my apartment floor surrounded by empty takeout containers and 2 monitors glowing like altars, I didn't just verify my personal backup server. I spun up a digital twin of the company's cloud infrastructure. Mirror image folder names, identical file paths, frozen timestamps, everything looked like his version, until you clicked. Then, mine appeared. Originals untouched, annotated with Git logs pointing straight to my commits. I could have proven his authorship down to every keystroke, but I wasn't ready to strike. Not yet. He needed to feel safe. Let him bask. Let him exude confidence, like a slow leak on a gravel road. And he got right to it, with gusto. Like he'd thrown all the doors wide open, both figuratively and literally. I once found a USB drive plugged into the kitchen Mac we all shared. He was quietly siphoning files directly into his Dropbox. Left it there unattended, as if no one was capable of betraying him. Arrogance doesn't just blind, it dulls instincts. Then came Friday. Olivia, our VP of Engineering, pulled me aside. "You're not on the client renewal plan," she stated. I feigned ignorance. "Oh." She trailed off. "Ethan Miller says you asked to be removed to focus on documentation. Didn't want to overburden you." Overburden? Like I was some fragile antique vase. I smiled. How thoughtful of him. She frowned. "Doesn't sound like you." I tilted my head. "It isn't." A silence settled between us. A spark passed, unspoken but palpable. She didn't say, "Help me prove it." And I didn't reply, "I already have everything," but I could feel the shift. Olivia is a smart woman. She'd seen these patterns before, and like Ethan Miller, they counted on women like me to acquiesce under the weight of politeness and plausible deniability. They forget we don't need their permission to sharpen our knives. I walked away from that conversation with a clear plan and Olivia's tacit approval. Next week, Ethan was scheduled to present our client migration strategy. The very strategy he claimed to have built from scratch. Perfect. Let him try, because I'd already swapped out 2 key API tokens in his presentation with non-functional links. I knew exactly which slide would break live in front of the board. But that was just the prelude. The real show was waiting on a private upload link, keyed only to me. Tuesday, 9:04 a.m. The blinds in the boardroom were half closed. The air hung thick with the smell of burnt espresso. Ethan Miller walked in, radiating importance like he'd just invented Ethernet. His tan was too deep for autumnal Ohio, most likely artificial. He squeezed between me and Google, trying to figure out how REST APIs work. Olivia sat at the head of the table, her face a stone mask. The CTO offered a polite nod. The head of marketing whispered something to legal. No one looked at me. He launched his presentation. Slide 1, a revolutionary approach to migration. Slide 2, client-centric cloud logic. Slide 3, live secure token deployment demonstration. Click. And, nothing. The token spun, stalled, and spat out a 4003 error with a neat timestamp and the explanation unauthorized. Invalid credential signature. Contact the original administrator. His jaw tightened. His finger hovered over the trackpad. "Are you all right, Ethan Miller?" Olivia asked with the clinical detachment of a pathologist. He clicked again. The next slide loaded, but half the embedded chart was missing. I watched him sweat through his bonobos like he was competing in the Olympics. The CTO leaned forward. "This demonstration doesn't reflect the latest deployment protocol. Where's the container security sequence?" Ethan Miller stammered. "It's cached. I don't know why it's not syncing. Maybe a merge conflict." No. He wasn't failing because of that. I'd changed the repository endpoint at 2 a.m., replaced it with a dummy framework, and revoked the AWS key tied to his cloned project. He copied the interface but forgot one thing. I hard-coded the final OAuth confirmation to route through a proxy server with silent tracing. In short, he was presenting my work through his fake shell. He was stepping on every landmine I'd laid. Olivia tapped her pen against the table, her gaze boring into Ethan Miller. "Ethan Miller, are you claiming this entire architecture was designed exclusively by you?" Ethan blinked, as if waking from a dream. "Well, yes. I mean, of course, I worked with the team, but the core elements were all under my direction." God, does he really think this will work? I thought. That no one will check, that I have no proof? Olivia nodded slowly, turning to me with a question. is that accurate? And here it was, the moment people like Ethan Miller always miscalculate. The moment the woman they tried to erase stops being nice. No, I said, pulling a flash drive from my jacket pocket. This contains real-time development logs, commit history, and security tokens for every phase of development over the last 9 months. All timestamped, all attributed. You'll find that the last legitimate version was completed under my admin name. Everything after that, including Ethan Miller's version, is a fork from a corrupted clone. No backups, no integrity, no legitimate claim to ownership. Silence descended. The air conditioning hummed to life, or perhaps it was the sound of Ethan Miller's soul escaping his body through his pores. I inserted the flash drive into the port, opened the logs, and started a screen recording showing him accessing restricted directories at 2:43 a.m. using a spoofed shell, culminating in a frame-by-frame display of a deletion script activating on every folder marked with my username. Olivia remained silent for a long 6 seconds. Then, she spoke as if chiseling words from stone. Call the meeting to a halt. Legal counsel, stay. Everyone else, please leave the room. Ethan Miller started to protest, his voice trembling with indignation. This is absurd. No, she cut him off, her gaze flashing like steel. What's absurd is thinking you could bury talent like that and not leave a trace. You underestimated the wrong engineer. As people began to rise to leave, Olivia leaned across the table, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. You've just presented stolen intellectual property to the board of directors. Ethan Miller's hands shook like aspen leaves in a breeze. I remained silent, knowing the next move was mine. He was desperate to backtrack that day. Slack messages poured in, let's talk. Calendar invites, clear up the misunderstanding. Even a bouquet of sunflowers appeared on my desk with a card, to new beginnings, E. I left them in the hallway by the janitor's closet. Let them rot. At 5:17 p.m., my phone vibrated. Blocked number. I answered. His voice, quiet and broken, came through the line. You don't have to do this. I said nothing. I get it. I went too far, he continued. But do you really want to blow everything up? You're smart. You're respected. Call it a misunderstanding? Co-authorship? Share the glory? Hell, I'll even retroactively rewrite all the copyrights. Finally, I spoke. Are you begging for mercy, Ethan Miller? Silence. I don't know what mercy is. I make backups. Click. I hung up. By 6:30 p.m., legal was already inundating me with formal requests to hand over the server backup files. They needed to verify IP ownership, trace the chain of custody, and confirm that the API keys I provided could indeed nullify Ethan Miller's version. I replied, attaching a zip folder and a timestamped invoice from my cloud hosting provider, detailing every personal payment I'd made to preserve what their infrastructure had lost. I added, please note, this was my personal initiative, not company-sanctioned, to protect against data loss. No NDAs apply to the server. Ownership resides with me. 20 minutes later, Eagle summoned me to a meeting. Not with Ethan Miller, but with me. Olivia was already waiting in the glass-walled office when I entered. She stood, nodded to the representative, and declared, before we begin, I want to state for the record that I warned management months ago that we weren't utilizing her potential enough. This company doesn't deserve her, but we need her. Let's start there. The lawyers, surprisingly, dropped their stances and simply demanded clarity. I provided them with access logs, change histories, and 3 emails Ethan Miller had forwarded to clients, using templates I'd written word for word. And then I pulled out my trump card. Your compliance rules state that all code pushed to production must be reviewed by 2 engineers, I said, swiveling my laptop screen. This, I pointed to a screenshot, is Ethan Miller's unauthorized code push on a Sunday at 2:43 a.m., performed solo using elevated privileges he wasn't even granted. The lawyers' faces paled. That's grounds for termination under your own protocol, I added, and carries client liability if it caused a breach, which it nearly did, by the way, because his patch introduced a recursive call loop that almost crashed the billing API during stress testing. Silence again. Olivia turned to the lawyers. So, what are you offering her? A promotion, control, or does she get her own goddamn department? But I wasn't finished, because Ethan Miller's panic had made him sloppy. That night, I re-examined the server logs and found a failed login attempt from a proxy IP linked to his name. The idiot had tried to hack my personal archive. I had it all documented with a traceroute. I smiled, opened a new tab, and forwarded everything to IT security with the subject line "Attempted breach of private infrastructure by internal employee." Let him stew in that. But I hadn't played my final card yet. Not yet. Because sometimes evidence alone isn't enough for revenge. You need an audience. People like Ethan Miller don't just crave control. They need a stage. Spotlights. Applause. It's their oxygen. And if you want to suffocate them, don't cut off access. Just shine the spotlight on them and let it roast them alive. The quarterly client summit was 3 days away. Big money would be in the room. Investors, partner reps, press attaches, and one very important tech journalist who once called our department a digital innovation think tank. Ethan Miller was still scheduled to present the infrastructure overhaul project he'd supposedly designed himself. They hadn't pulled him from the program. Why? Because legal processes move slowly, and reputational damage spreads instantly. But I wasn't going to wait for permission. I was writing the alarm. The day before the summit, I messaged Olivia. Subject, Plan B attached. Infrastructure restoration, authentic build chain. PDF, recommended to print this version instead of Ethan Miller's versions. And check slide 16. Olivia opened it within 5 minutes. 3 dots. Typing. Stopped. Started again. Olivia, slide 16 is just explosive. We need to discuss. Slide 16 was simple. A screenshot of our GitLab timeline, highlighting all commits under my ID, then Ethan Miller's forked copy, and the meta trail he tried to erase. But the real bomb was below the screenshots, in big red letters. If he built it himself, why did he need to clone it at 2:43 a.m.? The summit kicked off in a rented hotel ballroom, decked out with fake plants and even faker handshakes. I watched from the back rows, a laminated badge dangling around my neck like I belonged there, because I did. Ethan Miller stood at the podium in his custom-tailored suit, beaming like a politician who still thinks the scandal hasn't leaked. 5 minutes into his speech, Olivia took the stage. Before we continue, she said into the microphone, I'd like to publicly acknowledge the true architect of our data migration success. The woman who wrote the code, ensured the backups, and protected our entire internal system from a near-catastrophic rewrite, sacrificing her personal time and resources to do so. She turned and looked directly at me. Would you please join us on stage? Every eye in the room swiveled to me. Ethan Miller froze with a glass to his lips. I walked down the aisle, squared my shoulders, ignoring the burning gaze. Olivia handed me the microphone. Tell them what you found, if you're comfortable. I took a deep breath. No nerves, no hesitation. Just readiness. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that a senior team member had overwritten our proprietary infrastructure with cloned code and then attempted to erase the records of the original. What they didn't know was that I had a private, encrypted backup system that logged every version, including the one they deleted. Whispers, raised phones, camera flashes. Ethan Miller took a step back, his hands twitching nervously. I continued. What followed was a cascade of misconduct, falsification of ownership, unauthorized access to administrative functions, and a desperate cover-up attempt that jeopardized compliance with numerous client contracts. I brought this to the attention of management, and to my surprise, instead of burying the truth, I was offered the opportunity to speak publicly. Olivia beamed. We believe transparency matters. I handed back the microphone and walked off the stage to applause. And only one person in the room was squirming. Ethan Miller stood there, looking shell-shocked. His face had gone pale, his tie looked like it was choking him, and his suit seemed too tight. He didn't say another word for the rest of the summit. But I wasn't done yet, because while he was melting under the ballroom lights, his Dropbox, the one he used to smuggle code to his freelancer buddies, was going down. And I had the login because guess what was written on that USB drive in the kitchen Mac? A sticker. The password was TH03. The idiot secured his empire with a middle school insult. I opened the folder labeled Consulting Gigs, and inside, a goldmine awaited. 16 subfolders, each named after a different company, none of them ours, biodata go snap deployment Draker pitch slides, all timestamped, all modified during work hours, and every single one contained a piece of our proprietary code, tweaked just enough, a different font here, a renamed variable there, but I knew my builds, my fingerprints were all over it. The hit was like ice whiskey to the chest. He wasn't just stealing from me, he was reselling our infrastructure to competitors. The sabotage wasn't just some ego trip, but a lucrative side hustle. He was bleeding us dry from the inside, laundering my architecture and backroom deals through shell entities. If the summit was a spotlight, this was a guillotine. I archived the entire folder structure, encrypted it, and drafted an email to Olivia and the legal team. Subject: IP breach requires immediate action. Attached: Dropbox logs, file hashes matching our current code, screenshots of stolen features, a line-by-line comparison, my analysis of potential damages, customer privacy breaches, and, for added spice, a note that it was a violation of law if he was using company time for these contracts. But I didn't send it. Not yet. Justice done in silence is easily buried. I needed witnesses. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with our internal compliance auditor, Jamal, the guy who once audited the entire department for buying routers on eBay. He didn't mess around. I handed him the flash drive. Said only one thing: if you want to save the company, open this before lunch. At 1:12 p.m., the fire alarm wailed. All engineering and IT personnel were herded into an emergency all-hands meeting in the main conference room. Everyone except Ethan Miller. He was nowhere to be found. I watched from my desk, sipping coffee, as Jamal and Olivia silently scrolled through the contents of the folder on the big screen. Every few minutes, someone paled. I recognized several engineers from competing firms, people we'd interviewed but not hired. And then, in one of the folders, our interview question templates, sent from Ethan Miller's email. He'd been leaking internal documentation to candidates so they could prep. Not so they could moonlight for him. 3:41 p.m. Ethan Miller returned. His badge didn't work. He knocked. Security let him in. 4 minutes later, he emerged, as white as plaster dust, carrying a cardboard box. No jacket. No badge. Mouth slightly open, but he didn't say a word. Whispers ripped through the office, Slack exploded with messages. And I just watched him walk out the front doors. No announcement, no statement, just vanished into thin air. But the most exquisite part was his summit speech, the one he'd spent 2 weeks rehearsing in front of the mirror. The recording was still up on the website. Only Olivia had managed to slip in an editor's note at the end. This presentation is based on the work of my name, whose original architecture enabled the successful customer migration and uncovered the theft of intellectual property. We thank her for safeguarding our systems and our integrity. Ethan Miller's name was never mentioned again. But I wasn't done yet. While the company was picking up the pieces, I was already building something else, something outside their firewall. I didn't quit. Not yet. The following week, I was offered his job, Director of Digital Architecture, with a pay raise, a corner office, and a freshly minted LinkedIn post from the PR department titled Rebuilding from Within. Cute, flattering, utterly meaningless. I declined. Instead, I asked for 2 things: full data rights to any architecture I had personally created or maintained outside the office, and a 6-month transition contract to migrate my systems, train a replacement, and then disappear. They balked. The lawyers panicked, their faces contorting in horror. But Jamal, bless his soul, backed me, reminding them that I had, in fact, never signed away the IP on my offsite backups. And if they didn't want a very public and messy copyright battle, they'd better concede that I now owned the digital backbone of their company's most successful product line. And I was prepared to walk, slam the door. Olivia scheduled a one-on-one meeting. You don't want to, she started, then trailed off, as if searching for the right words. Stay? I replied, meeting her gaze. I want to build without looking over my shoulder. She nodded, with sadness, but understanding. You've earned that. We didn't shake hands, but clinked coffee mugs. A quiet show of mutual respect. 3 weeks later, I sat in my apartment, 2 laptops humming as my private infrastructure project rolled into soft beta. Not a company yet. A modular migration automation platform, built entirely from the bones of what they tried to erase. And you know what? That journalist from the summit, the one who'd watched the whole drama unfold, messaged me afterward. You're a ghost-turned-sniper. She wrote an article titled The Woman Who Backed Herself Up. It went viral in under 36 hours. My inbox was bursting with recruiter solicitations. Venture capitalists circled like vultures sensing a kill. Former colleagues sent belated messages dripping with regret and "Jin, you were right." Even Draker, my competitor, offered me carte blanche, name your team and the check is yours. But I didn't want to play in someone else's sandbox. I dreamed of owning the entire beach. Then came the cherry on top. An email from Ethan Miller, sent from a domain I didn't recognize. Likely a remnant of his previous side hustle. You won. They took everything. Hope it was worth it. I stared at the message for a long time, almost paralyzed. Then I typed a reply. I didn't win, Ethan Miller. You just finally lost in front of everyone. But I didn't send it. Deleted it, because those kinds of people don't deserve closure. They deserve the echo of silence as the world moves on without them. And my world was getting louder. 6 months later, I saw him again on LinkedIn, rebranded as a digital transformation consultant. Same smug grin, different buzzwords, helping companies future-proof their tech stack. Not a word about the firing, not a word about the subsequent scarlet letter. Just the algorithmic optimism of a man who thinks the internet forgets. But it doesn't. A former intern tagged me in the comments, wasn't this the guy caught stealing code last year? I didn't reply. Didn't need to, because by then I wasn't in the comments, I was on stage. My platform, now known as Umbra Stack, had just closed its 3rd major enterprise contract. The same clients Ethan Miller had once tried to poach were now sending me 6-figure NDAs for implementation. I spoke at Tech Pulse. Black jeans, blazer, 0 apologies. On the screen behind me was the phrase I had etched into the very bottom of every Umbra Stack page: if they try to delete you, make sure your backups are louder. People laughed. They didn't know the origin story. And that was fine. The ones who needed to remember already did. After my talk, a recruiter from Draker approached me, asked if I'd be interested in being acquired. Said they'd triple my valuation. I smiled and handed him a thumb drive with my company's logo on it. Not for sale, but available by subscription, I said. He nodded, impressed. I walked away without giving him a chance to respond. Timing is everything. Ethan Miller, last I heard, tried to start a consulting business in Scottsdale. It imploded in under 3 months. Someone leaked screenshots from his last employer's internal chat, calling his pitch recycled garbage with stolen CSS. Poetic, really. And I kept my promise. I trained my replacement, exported my systems, and left that old company on my own terms. No drama. No goodbye cake, just an empty desk and a legacy that couldn't be erased. No one applauded when I left, but 3 days later, a junior engineer emailed me to say she'd been watching and taking notes. Wrote, "You made me believe we're not disposable." I stared at that line for a long time. Then I poured a glass of wine, opened my dashboard, and watched the server logs roll in. Usage up, clients connecting, redemption isn't a moment, it's a sustained connection, because they tried to erase me, but I'm not disappearing, I'm updating.